worker friendly. And the other thing I'm concerned with is with all of these developments coming in, I haven't heard anybody talking about the infrastructure like Babcock Street or Jupiter or Malabar. I mean, they're so congested. It takes me 45 minutes to an hour. I live up in work in Melbourne on a Galley Boulevard. 45 minutes to an hour to get to work and back every day. And it's just, when I first moved here 6 years ago, it took me 30 minutes tops. It's just the congestion is horrible, and you're putting more and more developments in, and nothing's happening to help the roads. So anyway, that's my thing. But I would like to have to see a couple more workshops where we can be engaged and get good answers and understand what's going on a little better. So
Yeah, and I'll have staff address that, ma'am. But to your point, you're absolutely right. I did say, even if it took Saturday workshops, right? I did say that because it's important to each and every one of us up here. But to that same right along that same vein, I know that they also had an opportunity for you to engage online. And ma'am, did we pass that information out to the public so that they can engage with us by email and such?
Yes, so we held two public workshops and we did try to overlap it in the evening to be sensitive to residents that are coming after work. We held one virtual, which did overlap in the evening as well. We had an input@pbfl.org email address set up to take all written responses to anyone who wasn't able to attend either in person or virtually. We advertised it, in a variety of different ways, more than what we typically do for like a press release of a project, engaging with both residents and stakeholders. So the development community is also considered a stakeholder. And we had 59 attendees across all three virtual workshops. We had 186 public comments, both residents and development community. So, we felt out of most of the public workshops that we've done, this was pretty well attended and we got a pretty strong response rate.
No, thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, I guess the point, if you can, and I want you to address this because she mentioned some concerns, right? So if we could address her concerns that she just mentioned with our infrastructure and et cetera, can we address those concerns?
So the update to the land development code that's coming before you tonight is pertaining to the update to the comprehensive plan. And that is making sure that our land development code is compatible with the comprehensive plan that the council adopted. It doesn't address, it's not addressing changes to impact fees associated with transportation improvements, parks, police, fire, and infrastructure improvements, and the impact fees associated with that. So we haven't touched that, and that in fact is coming back in September when council adopts the impact fees for private development projects.
So you're spot on, ma'am, but it's something that's coming before us in September. And I believe the 19th, when we're talking about impact fees and how we garner those funds to increase our infrastructure. So I hope that was helpful, ma'am.
yes, will the infrastructure also include maybe more for the ambulances or ambulance stations, fire stations, police stations?
Well, yes, ma'am. We
Because where
actually
I'm at, it's like there's nothing around me. if I
actually,
need
ma'am,
help.
we did that. We're not discussing that today, but at our last meeting, we addressed that. We're actually moving into some temporary stations, and we're actually going to go into debt management to create additional fire stations. And on the 13th, actually, you're welcome to join us at our groundbreaking for Fire Station 7, which is on Palm Bay Road, which
Okay.
is the old fire station number 1. But yes, ma'am, your concerns are being heard. It's just today we're dealing with the our land development codes and our comprehensive plan.
And one more, how do you find out about these workshops? I mean, I saw it posted. I follow you on Facebook, and that's where I see them posted. But like I said, the ones I saw posted were the three that were in a time I can't attend. I can't not work and attend a
Well,
virtual
What I love for you to
meeting.
do, what I love for you to do is get her information. So she's going to provide you with that link. Because do you have email access? So maybe you could all your concerns we could go ahead and share that in that way. That's what they're saying. They had so many comments that have been incorporated in this process. But I love your engagement, man. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. So if you wouldn't mind, thank you. Next speaker. Anyone else wish to speak for or against this item? I've got Miss Anna Saunders and then Mr. Bruce Moya. If you wouldn't mind coming up here, sir, you're next.
And can I just want to make sure that we're talking about the repeal action right now,
Yes.
right? That I don't talk out of
Yes,
place.
yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so the one thing that I would
Can
just
you
ask,
raise up that, ma'am? You're pretty tall.
I am, but I feel like
Okay,
can you hear me okay?
Okay,
I
go
won't
ahead.
bend over.
Go ahead.
I would just like consideration to not repeal the Parkway Mixed Use PMU zoning category that you have right now. In Parkway Mixed Use, there is a requirement for commercial established in that zoning category, in addition to the residential components. But the commercial requirement is based on the number of residential units that you're actually presenting and providing in that particular development, not based on sort of an arbitrary 20% of an acreage. So what we want is we want to have commercial that's viable, that's meaningful, that can be supported by the residents around it, and requiring the amount of commercial, letting the number of units dictate that amount so that it does have the ability to be viable, I think is really important. You shouldn't be penalized because your project site is large and you have wetlands and you have this and you've got roadways and what have you, because your project can be gigantic and you could have, let's just say you do acre lots and you have very few lots, you're still going to have that same number of same acreage of commercial to put in place, but you're not going to have the residential component to substantiate and support it. And so my request would be, again, if we could consider keeping PMU in the code so that we have a different mechanism to provide the commercial uses that the council is made very aware that you guys want, but that we have the ability to provide you something that it can be sustainable and last long term.
I see. So, even though it says it's pretty lax, right? You got commercial, it could be a church, it could be,
Sure.
it's just not specific. It's giving you a broader, and it's backing out the wetlands as well.
So just to give you a really quick breakdown of numbers, the Palm Vista West project that you guys know about on the west side of the Parkway by Emerson and Pace, it's in round numbers, it's 1,200 acres. If I take the wetlands and the open space out, it's 574 times 20% is 115 acres of commercial or what have you. Publix, everyone knows what a Publix is, those out parcels, those are 15 acres on average, anywhere from 12 to 15 acres. Includes the Publix, includes 2 or 3 out parcels in it. 115 acres total provides 8 public sites in that 115 acres. That's an enormous amount of commercial to be supported for. You're not going to have 8 Publixes in for a development that's going to support 2,300 units.
So is that the property that came before us that was 1,200 acres?
Yes, sir.
1,198 acres, and 27 acres of it was zoned commercial.
It had a land use of commercial.
Yes. Had a land use of commercial, and yet it was wetlands. The way you designed it, right, was wetlands, and we didn't approve that because there was no commercial on that site.
Yes and no. So the way it's being described makes it sound like I should be wearing a black cape and a hood, but that's not quite the way it really. You've got to remember.
I didn't mean it that way, ma'am. I'm just saying.
But the Palm Vista as a whole, the west side and the east side, you've got to remember that was a joint venture. So when that whole project, that whole perimeter, the 1,300 acre or the 1,200 acres on the west plus the development on the east side came in, it had a 60-acre commercial node in the middle of it. That's why you've got that acreage along Emerson and the park. And I'm not trying to hijack the conversation for this particular project. I'm just trying to use it as an example. And the 40 square feet per residential unit that's permitted in PMU, and I apologize for going over, but it is based on the number of residential units that you're bringing to the table so that that commercial can be viable.
So let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
Based on that project today, 1,198 acres, if I remember correctly, right? What would it be today with this zoning now?
With PMU?
With what we're proposing today?
Right now?
Yeah.
If I less out the wetlands, I less out the open space, I have to give you 115 acres of commercial in addition to the 60 acres that's already there. So you would have
And what is it
175
with the
acres,
PMU right now?
excuse me,
What would it be right now,
for
the way it's zoned?
PMU, I'd
Yes.
give you an additional 10 acres of commercial in addition to the 60 that's sitting there today. So you'd end up with 70 acres total in that intersection.
But out of the 1,198 acres, I remember just 27 of it. How does it become 60? I don't remember 60.
Because there's commercial acreage outside of the boundary of that 1,198 acres, right?
Yeah, but
So
that's outside.
it is, but when that
Mm,
project was
yeah.
brought to the city 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
well, 15 years ago, the whole project, the project in its entirety included the 60 acres. It was a joint venture. So that entity they still experience or participate in a working relationship, but the joint venture dissolved when the 2008 market changes occurred.
Okay,
So
thank
we
you.
had the land
Okay.
uses there. And so what happened is we actually had the land use for the zoning for PUD, but because they didn't move forward with it because the economy changed, we reverted back to an AU zoning, and we had the underlying land use is what you see that's left over today.
Okay.
And you saw me more times than you probably like to for me to come in and change the land use and the zonings back to PUD because they reverted back after a certain period of time.
So one last question, right? You said 100 acres if we propose this, but I think if I'm understanding you correctly, ma'am, you're taking the amount that's outside of those borders at this point.
I'm
When
not.
you say 100 acres, right, or 60 acres,
Yes.
I remember 27, right? But you're saying you're incorporating
So
60 that were outside of those 1,198 acres.
So
Am I
27,
correct?
not exact. So 27 acres of commercial land use is on the west side of the parkway.
correct?
Of those 27 acres, 14 of those acres were encompassed by a shared stormwater and wetland system, right? And so when we brought that to staff back in the day, we said, hey, this is what it looks like. Staff suggested, let's clean up our books. It's not really commercial. It's been that way. No problem. But it had always historically been like that. So that was the land use. The actual usable net acreage of commercial for that corridor today as it sits is 60 acres of true commercial, viable, no wetlands. It's just straight commercial. And so I think the confusion was the difference between the land use, the underlying land use, and what was actually zoned and what's sitting there today as a commercial entity that I could go back and it has a CC zoning on it. We could come in with site plans and submit those
Okay.
tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, if I may, Anna, just two things. Correct me if my memory isn't right, but wasn't that 60 acres of commercial property under a different ownership?
It was originally part of the joint venture, and then yes, so the joint venture dissolved, and so
Right.
that entity, yes.
So now it's under a different ownership. They can do pretty much whatever they want with it as long as what the zoning.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's not part of this project actually. And also your comments are strictly to PMU zoning, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just to clarify, so they don't enjoy the benefit of a business relationship on this particular joint ownership, but there are agreements in place between the residential and the commercial entity where they've got cross access easements, stormwater, signage,
Right,
utilities.
yeah,
So they
I
still have
remember
that.
that.
So they do
Yep.
still have that underlying component that does tie those.
Where
two
they have
properties
access to it
together.
and that kind of
That's
thing. I
correct.
remember that, yeah.
And those are still valid today.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moya?
Evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's been a while since I've been here. Probably why I didn't even know that you guys were doing the land development code change. I found out at the Hobnob back in, was that August 6th? I assume you guys have probably been working on this since maybe January. I know when you guys did your land use, did your comp plan, you guys had public workshops at the beginning of the process. And then here you had them at the very end. That was a little disheartening to hear that this was even coming when we had no idea. And we would have loved to provide all this input a long time ago where it could be addressed way before we ever got to this point. So, and I know staff is working feverishly to get this thing, handled and address all these comments that are coming. And I'm not sure what the big rush is, but here we are. So I was hoping that we could have done a lot of this sooner and a lot of the stuff could have been ironed out because I don't really like the fact that something could get adopted only to know that, yeah, we're going to change it later. Because that means we got to deal with it now until it gets changed. So anyway, that was one thing. And then I was kind of, I guess that's kind of parodying the first speaker. And as far as Ms. Saunders was saying, we know everybody wants commercial, know the city needs it, but at the percentage rates that we're talking about, 20%, I mean, every 1,000-acre project, which I think there's some coming, you're talking about 2 Melbourne Square malls in one project. I don't think the city could handle that in a small area. So I think we need to have some sort of a formula, like she was saying, to say start at 20%, and then with all these other things you have to do, maybe that dwindles down to make it more palatable. So something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I'm disappointed, Bruce, because I specifically asked if you and the home builders were engaged, and the feedback was that there was feedback from the home builders and yourself as well. I specifically asked that question because I love for people to be engaged. So my question is, I know that I saw an email and I responded, as to my response was more along the lines of, have your concerns been addressed? And you said, yes, I'm working with staff or something along those lines.
Yes,
And now, yeah,
we did get together and we sent out the alarm, and so we got a group of people to sit down and
Okay.
go through this 180 something page code as quickly as we could and provide you written comments as quick as we could, because I think the first meeting you guys were thankfully that you tabled it so we could be here, but it was the first time I did hear about it was at the Hobnob, and we did get together as quickly as we could to get comments to staff and to you guys as well.
well, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your engagement.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Anyone else wish to speak? Raise your hand. Staff, I want to ask, I guess, Madam Joni, have you, I know that you've gotten a lot of concerns here, and we've addressed most of those concerns. Is that correct?
All of the concerns that we've received from the open house sessions, the input at pbfl.org email address, and to our individual employee email addresses, we've incorporated into the summary of the public input and staff's comments to those. Some of them we feel could be incorporated tonight because we either agree or it was an oversight. Some we believe need to be, discussed a little bit further to ensure that we're making the right amendments to the code. And that's why we propose phase 2. And some of them, depending on council direction and things like that from the past, we've said, we recommend no change. In other cases, there are some comments that are not related to the land development code pertaining to the comp plan, and where we feel like it's a good topic to discuss further, we've added it into phase 2. So we've got a variety of different comments, and so there are different action items depending on the type of comment that came in.
So Ms. Sullivan brought up some points regarding that percentage. What are your thoughts on that, and any feedback you could give us, or how do we consider those comments?
So the 20% commercial requirement currently under the PUD code always existed. It existed before we did this change. And I think it was changed originally back in like 2018 or 2019. I can't remember the year. So it existed previously in our current code. And we did change it in this first amendment that came up on August 8th to take into account some of the concerns that we heard about
I'm sorry, her name is
activating it.
Oh,
Saunders.
Saunders,
Anna Saunders.
as you were, Miss Saunders. Carry on.
I figured I knew who you were talking about. The requirement that Ms. Saunders is referring to in PMU is, it states a minimum of 40 square feet of commercial space provided for each residential unit proposed within a PMU. I don't know where that came from. I don't know that staff knows where that came from. And to her point about being arbitrary, I would be curious to know. And in fact, I did try to do a little bit of research today to find out, what is a good ratio for commercial square feet per single family residential lot. And there wasn't anything that we could find that was definite. So we're asking, if we are considering changing that, allow us to do a little bit more research to find out, what, and maybe SCAR can help us, Space Coast Association of Realtors, help us identify a figure that actually, a calculation that makes sense. So, I mean, I guess that's my response to that,
Okay.
but obviously at council direction, we're willing to go either way.
So that existed before is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. We're considering what you're saying, ma'am. All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Council? Someone else? Bruce, you already spoke. You'll come back for the second time. Come back. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, I'm closing the public hearing, asking for a motion.
So moved.
Second for discussion.
Got a motion by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Weinberg. Councilman Johnson?
Yes, Mayor. I can go either way with the PMU. Yes, it was there before, but obviously we weren't getting commercial before, so something needs to be changed. So I do like the idea of looking at some form of algorithm or something, some measurable. That's not something we're going to figure out right now, but I just wanted to make a motion to have that discussion. So
Copy that, sir. Well, that's the only thing
yes, sir.
that you're, Councilman Weinberg?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Councilman Johnson as far as that goes, but, and the open space and undevelopable lands are removed from that 20% requirement. But, I'd like to see something in there with, where it can be reduced at council's discretion. In other words, it can be presented to city council and staff can recommend 20%, staff can recommend 15% or something, to that effect where city council would have the ultimate decision on how that's applied rather than just have it written in stone that this is what's required.
So would that be more of a range is what you're looking for?
Well, I think, for each, I think it should be considered, for each development, look at the development, what they're requesting, what they're, and at that time, make a decision on what we're going to require as far as commercial use in that particular development, rather than just have a range.
Well,
How do you-
Mayor,
Yes, carry on.
I know we're going to be addressing that in the next item where
Yes.
we're creating the
Right.
LDCs, but
Right.
if that is what this council would like, staff would need to create some criteria because it can't be completely at council discretion because that would be arbitrary and it would, pass forth. But if council is interested in having staff come up with some considerations which may determine the amount, that could happen, but it can be completely up to council's discretion.
Copy that. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Councilman Weinberg,
No, I understand it can't be arbitrarily at the council's decision, but if staff can bring up some, some under certain conditions that can be less and again, determined by city council, that meets what I'm looking to do, really.
okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilman Johnson, you made the motion. So you're good with setting up certain criteria when we go down range, not now.
Yes, sir. I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Deputy Mayor?
Mayor, thank you. I would tend to agree with Councilman Johnson with his recommendation. I think all projects don't necessarily create it equal. Yeah, I get the legal aspect of not leave it up to council, but I do believe as well, based on the area of the city, all project being the standard number could just be problematic to some degree. So I would definitely encourage that staff looked at it and make consideration to lower it.
Yeah, I like the criteria aspect to it, and I'll tell you why. we have a lot of beds or a lot of rooftops, right? And you're right, we don't have enough commercial, we don't have enough light industrial, we don't have enough jobs, right? So I think setting that tone and setting that criteria is critical. I want to live and work here in Palm Bay. For years, many people have to go work in Melbourne, right? And we're not creating that type of industry. So I like the aspect of a criteria. Perhaps there's a sweet spot. I'm a baseball guy. When you hit the ball on the sweet spot, that ball just goes over the fence, right? And I think we could work together to get that sweet spot. When we do need a criteria, and so I'm good with that. Maybe we work out those details. What are those algorithms, as he says, or can we get SCAR to get their input? Um, there are many communities that have been developed based on their commercial, based on their growth, without the urban sprawl. So let's get details from how they're working and being successful. Just down the street, you always mention certain cities, right, that have grown in commercial, that capacity. How did they get to that point? So certainly we don't want anything that's gonna ruin our future, but certainly we always have to consider of creating jobs for our citizens. And that's where I'm at. So getting that right sweet mix is gonna be our staff to bring that back to us. So I'm in agreement with that. Any other discussion, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Question for the city attorney, regarding, we're not speaking at all on the educational, let me see,
No, that's next. That's number 2.
that's me next.
Yeah.
All right, okay, I'm just waiting.
I'm
All right,
holding
okay,
on.
yes, sir.
I'm in agreement with you. I think we're on the same page. Anything else? You made the motion, Councilman Johnson. You made the second.
What, do we need to amend it to give? We're good?
No, we're good.
All right, okay, no, I'm good, Mayor.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. We're now on item number 2, Madam Smith.
Ordinance 2024-33. An ordinance of the City of Palm Bay, Brevard County, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances by creating Title 17, Land Development Code, to provide for the governance and regulation of the City of Palm Bay land development regulations, including zoning, accessory uses, subdivision requirements, signs, resources, streets, parking, building design, and development review procedures, providing for the repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for inclusion in the City of Palm Bay Code of Ordinances, providing for a severability clause, providing for an effective date.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to open up the public hearing. That's Ms. Sherman. He'll tee it off to
Alder Fruta Jones, thank you.
Madam Giancarlo Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Juliet, would you mind going back to slide 17? Thank you. So before we go to the individual items needing council direction, and Patricia, please correct me if I'm wrong, I do want to just make sure that we're good with these, verbally noting that the changes that we'd like to make between the first reading of the ordinance and the second reading of the ordinance, that we can incorporate these changes as mentioned.
Yes, if council votes to incorporate those changes, the clerk will have them for the next time in which they'll be in the actual ordinance.
Okay.
Well, you all provide them and the clerk will, of course, pass them forward.
So with that, I guess, does council have any thoughts or concerns with the cleanup items that staff identified that we'd like to incorporate into the final reading?
I'll start with Councilman Weinberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm good with the cleanup items. I was just glad to see that we returned RC zoning to the new LCD. LSC.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Deputy Mayor.
I'm good as well. Just a couple of comments, Mayor. Thank you. I think it was it's worth noting the nuance between the educational establishment versus the educational institution. I think that makes sense. So a lot of these things makes a lot of sense as well. So I appreciate the fact that the work that's being done in there's quite a few of it. I think staff did a pretty good job. identify with the help of the stakeholder as well, take all that into account. And as Councilman Weinberg mentioned, the RC, I think makes sense to keep that in there. Just want to say thank you for the work you guys done with that. And I think also going back to the tree ordinance and so on, and I think all that, it just taking all that into consideration makes a lot of sense. Just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I want to echo that. My issue, as you know, was the convention center, right? As you obviously know, because I'll say it again. I've been saying it for 3 years and it wasn't there. But I also wanted to share about the clusters. I think you gave that some thought, right? I was really concerned about that. I'm not totally exuberant about it, but you did give that some thought, and you did consider all the comments that were given by our citizens. So that being said, yeah, I would just, I'm not totally 1000% with the clusters issues, but I understand they're part of subdivisions, right?
If I may, so what I'm asking for at this point is just these 3 items listed under cleanup, because
Okay.
we're gonna come back to those council
Okay.
direction items individually.
I just
one by
wanted to
one.
get that off my chest, man,
Thank you.
because you guys did an outstanding job. And I know that it was the entire team. And then we did taxi these last few. But that's where I'm having a little bit of heartburn, and along with the educational thing that I'll tag team with Councilman Johnson, because I think it's like we read each other's minds with that, right? At least I feel like but yeah, ma'am, I'm good with those 3.
Thank you.
So carry on, Madam Giancarlo Brown.
The next slide, Juliet, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. So this one is sorry, let me get myself there. The tree removal permit under 1 acre. If you'd like me to read it again, I can, but essentially we're recommending that we try to address this under phase 2, because we don't yet necessarily agree or understand with the impact of a septic permit on infill lots and the drainage requirements on infill lots, hindering the removal of trees, requiring a permit to remove a tree.
Okay, council.
Ms. John Brown, Giancarlo Brown. Again, that's another one that I think it is great that you guys pausing on that and give it some more consideration, considering that over 70% of our city is on septic. So I applaud that, because when I see that, because that raised some concern, I got some calls and quite a few concerns with all builders community, that considering the challenge we're facing when it comes to all utilities challenges. So I think this is great. So we need to really look at this a lot closer in phase 2, making the right decision for everybody, right? The residents and the building community as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm good with phase 2. I think we're all good with that.
Yep.
Carry on.
Okay, next slide. Thank you, Juliet. Placement of street trees in residential subdivisions. Again, staff agrees this is a fair point, and we would like to address it in phase 2, because we do want to talk with Public Works, talk with utilities, talk with the development community. There were concerns about use of oak trees, placement in the right of way instead of on the property, private property line. So if council's good with this, we'd prefer to try and address this under phase 2.
I'm good. Deputy Mayor? Council, yes.
Okay. Next item, cluster subdivisions. I know this one's probably going to take some conversation. I'm happy to reiterate everything again, but Again, staff supports keeping the cluster subdivisions. We also support the request of allowing the minimum, reducing the minimum from 50-foot wide lot to a minimum of 40-foot wide lot. Again, the developer and the builder have to comply with all of the lot requirements, so that's incumbent upon them.
Council?
I'm fine with that, Mayor.
I was with you on that one too, Mayor. I can go with or without, really. More so without, but I'll listen to council's feedback.
Councilman Weinberg?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. A couple of things. I have some concerns about the cluster homes. I understand it's still a conditional use, but specifically to allow cluster homes in rural residential estate, suburban residential estate zones. You've talked many times about preserving rural residential areas, seeing homes on larger lots. To allow cluster homes in these areas that are zoned, whether they're developed currently right now with surrounding, state homes or rural residential homes, but to allow cluster homes in those zoning codes, I just think it's a mistake.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. So I think we have, I'm with Councilman Weinberg on that, and I think I've got
Yes, sir.
Councilman Johnson on that as well.
Are
So
we proposing to keep cluster subdivisions, but removing the use out of rural residential, suburban residential, and the
yeah,
Residential estate now.
I would like to just make a comment that the reduction to 40 would not apply to all districts.
say again, say
The
that.
reduction to 40-foot wide lots would not apply to all districts because the language says that you can do half of what your district allows. So like if you're rural residential, you have to do half an acre. It's not like you're going to go to 40-foot lots. So it's not that you're going to have small lots everywhere. It depends on what district you have. So if you're in a RS1 or RS2, you may get to the 40, but not when you're in the rural areas. So like we can pull up that regulation and see if that makes a difference. But just so you're aware, it says in no event you can have less than half an acre in some of these districts.
Yeah, I think the concern has been that we've been losing the rural residential. I think that's the concern, and if we don't have it, then there'll be those clusters anyway.
Okay.
So I think that, I don't know, that's where I'm at. I don't know how council feels, but that's where I'm at. I want to preserve whatever rural residential that we have in the city of Palm Bay. I actually would love to have more, but we'll see how that future holds, right?
Yeah,
Thank you. We're good? Okay, carry on.
so I just want to confirm to make sure I understand.
Yes,
We're keeping cluster subdivisions as a conditional use, but only in RS1, RS2, and RS3, and allowing a minimum of 40-foot wide lots in RS1, RS2, and RS3. Just to confirm that,
Yeah.
and just like if that's what council's agreeing on, I just want to
I
make
think
sure.
that's,
Yeah,
I think that-
again, even in RS1, RS2, and RS3 as a conditional use, yeah. So it'd have to be approved by
the
council.
CUP, yeah.
Correct. It's
Yep.
not a zoning district. It's only a
Sure.
use. But I just want to double check, Pat, RS1, RS2, RS3, is there any issue with a minimum 40-foot wide lot?
Let me read what it says. Sorry. In the proposed, number one, you have to have 10 acres to do this. So it's not like you can have any piece of property. Then the lot size, right now, it says 1/2 acre minimum in rural residential, and then 50% of the minimum required in all other districts, but no less than 6,000 square feet. Lot width, it says 50, it would be changed to 40. And then there are setbacks. So yeah, so in the RS1 districts, it would be 50%, no less than 6,000, and no less than 40 foot in width.
Okay,
So there's some
so we're good
protections.
for 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Okay. Next slide, common recreation and open space, and this is,
So, ma'am, I know that we're doing things backward, but maybe we should let the public speak before we actually start taking items. Should we allow the public to come up and hear what they're saying? Because we're going item by item at this point, and I'd rather hear from them before we go item by item. Madam
Certainly.
Attorney?
That may be what you want to do, because what you may end up doing is going item by item, and then the public provides feedback, and then you go back item
Yeah,
through
yeah,
item.
yes,
So
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
certainly that's up to you. It could, as you mentioned, be more efficient.
Yes, ma'am. We started going into it, but I want to hear from the public today. Is there anyone that wishes to speak for or against the side? Come on up, Mr. Mills, I believe. Dr. Mills. Dr. Mills.
Alan Miles, 350 Garvey Southwest. If you can go back to that other slide, that's the one we're talking about, right? And it said RE, and I believe that's residential estate.
so that would be slide.
The one you had just, yeah, that's it. So I believe I'm an RE, and areas near Lockmire, I think, are RE. So if you're saying 40 foot, you're saying that an 80 by 125, which is probably 80% of what Palm Bay is divided into, quarter acres, 80 by 125, then you could get two houses, 40 and 40, in an 80-foot area in a residential area. And then I'm concerned, what would you do with all the septic tanks? How are you going to do that? So I don't think 40 foot should be the appropriate amount, because you're creating a hazard in that community, and you're doubling up the amount of people there. Where are you going to put the cars? Where are you going to put everything? So that's my input. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Dr. Mills. Ms. Giancarlo Brown?
Septic,
This is, yeah.
septic tanks are not allowed when you propose a subdivision that's 3 lots or more. You're required to connect to centralized sewer, and if you don't have centralized sewer, you're required to bring centralized sewer to your property.
So I think to explain it a little more in depth, we're talking about a minimum of 10 acres and someone coming to develop 10 acres, not just, a house here, a house there. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am, come on up.
Pat Delper, 410 Georges Avenue. I don't feel that we need another subdivision. With the cluster subdivisions, you're just going to add more traffic. And I can say there is 10 acres that could possibly be put a cluster subdivision, which will create more traffic in the neighborhood. And why do we need to do that? We already have subdivisions. Why do we need to add that? And I think it would create more of a headache. So, because I know there is one that could go that way.
Thank you. Madam Giancarlo Brown, you want to respond to her comment?
Yes, I would like to clarify that cluster subdivision doesn't mean that you're going to have more lots. It's whatever lots you can have today, you're going to have with cluster subdivision. So the number of lots is not going to change. The number of cars is not going to change. The only thing that changes is the size of your lot so that you can have more open space. So you're exchanging that. Smaller lots, more common open space, but it's not changing the density. It's not changing the number of units that you can have.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Master Chief?
Bill Batten, 586 Ocean Spray Street Southwest. I wasn't sure if you're questioning when you said this, if it was just pertaining to public hearing number 2, or if it was just specific items that you were just got through talking about. Just in case, and I'll do mine now.
Yes.
Question number 1 was commercial open space reduction from 20% to 10%. There's a negative side that I can see with that, because when you have your commercial space, That's also maximum amount of runoff and stormwater. When you have open space, that's also allows for your ground percolation back into to your water replenishment back into your aquifer. So you might be able to get more building on there, but you're losing something on the other end of it. That's one side that I see negative with that. The other one was the tree ordinance. I know you're saying you're going to try and do more research into your tree ordinance with phase 2. I understand that, but I'll speak for specific happened on the street over from me. We went through and we had gopher turtles on, so we got the site protected. The site was protected, so it could not be cleared until they remediated the gopher turtles. And the person said, well, it's cheaper for us to pay the fine than it is to solve the system. So I don't know what's happened with it, but that site has now just been cleared within the last week, and they weren't supposed to clear it. But if this was the case, there was no permit, they did it. What's going to be the repercussions for this? Do I have to now be the land supervisor going around saying, hey, they just cleared this site because the person wanted it cleared? Or when there's permits on this, when they don't post it because the permit's not supposed to be issued because it's got a red flag on it from the protected species, which comes from another department. So how are we? I want to know what the process is, how we can look at that, because it's definitely right now it's just being, who cares? They're going to go there and they're doing it. Because I know I had the permits on the could not get the permit pulled because of the protected species. So go from there. Tell me how we're going to solve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Master Chief. Madam Brown?
On the common open space reduction, I'm sorry, on the open space reduction on commercial from 20% to 10%, in the comp plan, residential requires 20% minimum open space, and non-residential is 10% open space. And so this keeps us compatible. Obviously, council can decide to require more commercial as long as we're meeting our minimum under the comp plan to be compatible. But remember, the more open space you require on a commercial site, the less commercial square foot, building footprint you'll get. The other side of the coin is that, if they provide more commercial, they can always provide more open space. If they decide to use low impact development standards, like doing, more pervious area, then there are some incentives and inducements there for them as well.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Yeah, we were very concerned about this 10%. I didn't realize that it was in your comp plan, so obviously that we're a little bit late on that one. But 10%, I don't know anybody that requires 10% open space on commercial. Like Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, you're going to provide 10% open space for what? If you can define open space for commercial a little differently, so that landscape buffers and things like that would be included as open space, I think that goes farther to promote commercial development as opposed to not promoting it by requiring open space for what? Not really sure what you're going to do in a commercial property. If you want to say, hey, if you're a restaurant, you have outdoor seating, that's open space. That's great. So if you can do it through definition for commercial or for non-residential only, get a little creative, I think that wouldn't be so bad.
I appreciate that, Bruce. Thank you. So, ma'am, incorporating Bruce's comments, that open space and commercial, I always ask, what's the intent, right? Town center intent, what's the intent?
Well, our intent is to comply with the comp plan, which has 10%. But if council wants staff to review doing a comp plan amendment and bringing that forth to reduce that requirement, we can certainly do that. We can also look at the definition for open space and find creative ways to encourage. I don't know how we would do this, but the current definition for open space is any parcel area of land or water essentially unimproved and set aside dedicated designated or reserved for public or private use or enjoyment. So to Bruce's point, you know, how much open space do you need on commercial? And that could be, you know, a courtyard within a plaza that has pavers that's pervious, that you have chairs and tables out, right? Or, you know, you can do doggy dining, what have you, and be able to consider that as open space requirement. So we can get creative, but for the time being, we're simply trying to comply with our comp plan.
So, and to that argument, Bruce, right? And I appreciate your comments. So I'm envisioning like the avenues. They've got really nice open space where you could, you know, multiple restaurants can go into a gathering space, all within the confines of that area. So I see your point. Yeah, maybe we incorporate that definition outside where it'd be like a town center effect. And that's where I was going. Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
Only question, what about areas like what it
Mickey D's or something.
well, I was thinking industrial flex use. Would that still
Light industrial.
light industrial, heavy industrial flex use?
Well,
Because
that's-
they're yeah,
What about that open space? Yeah,
they're
Councilman.
necessary.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's not really an
carry
area where you're just there to work. You're not there to, you know.
Right, you
so-
get a truck, a canteen with a food truck, right? And you get But that's a great question. I think Mr. Councilman Weinberg.
Yeah, I like Mr. Moyer's suggestions. But I mean, why can't we count landscape areas as part of that open, even though it's, you know, not for common recreation, but as open area? I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I think defining it to a little bit more, I think we're all in agreement with that, right?
So
Go ahead, ma'am.
there are 2 points I want to make. I'm sorry, I'm getting input from both sides, and
Okay.
I prefer you guys just chip in as you see fit. There are 2 different definitions as well for open space. There's resource and activity, and that's something that's contemplated as well. That's that comes from the comp plan. Pat just noted that the comp plan doesn't require a minimum 10% for open space for commercial. Rather, that was a request of the growth management director. So I would just ask Lisa to chime in on her thoughts on that one.
Good evening. Yes. So when you look at
Get on the mic, ma'am. I'm not sure.
I am
Yeah,
on,
there
but
you go.
maybe I need to be louder, which is
No.
unusual. What I wanted to point out is that the comprehensive plan has pretty thorough definitions regarding activity-based and resource-based open space. And when you're considering open space, I hear the conversation about why would commercial or industrial need open space. Open space is, again, not just for recreational purposes. Open space is there to alleviate a lot of conditions in a developed parcel. Okay. And these are conditions that are well known, well documented as far as heat sources, mental health relief, those, you know, beautification as you're going down a thoroughfare, your view sheds. They have multiple connotations, multiple uses, multiple needs. So we have attempted to add and better define what a resource-based or an activity-based open space may include. And we did, and if it didn't get in there, I apologize. We'll go back and look. We did add that the native buffer landscape around the perimeter of a property would count. We did add LIDs, such as if you have treatment trains, which is your planted a treatment train is where you don't just have a stormwater pond, but you have where they have the curb cuts going into the a swale, a landscape swale in the middle of a parking lot. Those type of items could be consistent with your open space requirements. And it just makes the experience of the commercial space a lot more, well, better for lack of a better word here. And so that is why we are requesting at least 10% of it be an open space. And we have expanded the definition to include a multiple uses in
Yeah, I think the communication part of sharing those expanded definitions, I think that's critical for our community to share what those expanded, because 10% could be, anything. And if they're not getting that definition, it's like, hey, what's going on here? So I think we need to share that and have that communication and maybe even expand it some more. But right now we can't expand it because we don't have a visual of it, right? That we can't suggest to expand it if we don't have a visual of it for the actual residents to see as well. So I do like the avenues as an example. I do like where they have different commercial establishments and they all come into a gathering place. It's quite, when you say mental health, it does help with mental health as well. So I can see your argument, ma'am. So thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir. Sir, go ahead.
Butchell Ranch 219 Trenton Avenue. The 40-foot lots, you mentioned you're gonna have septics, correct? I mean, not septics, you're gonna have sewer. Are you gonna have city water also? Or is it gonna be individual wells on each one of those lots?
Is that your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ma'am?
The same applies on 10-acre and subdivisions of parcels 3 or more. Bring
So
water to the site.
always utilities is city water and city sewer. Is that what I'm hearing? City water and city sewer subdivision. Yes. Anyone else wish to speak for or against this item? Yes, come on up, ma'am.
Mary Spar, I'm going to change the subject and do more general. Mary Spar, 825 Clifton's Cove Court in Cocoa, and I'm speaking for Turtle Coast Sierra Club. And we appreciate.
Can you get the mic closer
Yeah.
to you? Thank you, ma'am.
We appreciate the chance to come to the public input sessions. I attended, and our Sierra Club vice chair also attended. And I wrote written comments for Sierra Club, which focused on a different subject than you've just been discussing, natural resources, specifically wetlands, coastal areas, floodplain, trees, and the Indian River Lagoon. So to evaluate your proposed update, I started with the natural resources portion of the 2045 comprehensive plan. And I looked at the comp plan to see the changes made in 2023. Then I looked at the proposed land development code. And I found that there is still very important work to be done on the natural resources code. Now, Sierra Club realizes that you have these immediate practical problems regarding the zoning language and development complexities that you've been discussing. But we ask you to focus on natural resources improvements in the future for phase 2. Actually, we found 2 natural resources topics that may have been overlooked in the code update right before you. And we'd hope that our suggestions would be followed now, but at least let's take care of these 2 essential updates in phase 2. At first, to comply with your comp plan, you need to put wetland standards in your code. I could not find any wetland section in your code, and the 2045 plan says you need to update your code to put in wetland standards. Second, the coastal hazard areas language in your land development code needs to be updated to match what was put into the 2045 comp plan. Then, besides the wetlands and coastal area suggestions we'd hope for now, we asked you to consider 3 additional improvements in phase 2. First, strengthen your floodplain code to prevent new development from causing increased flooding problems on neighboring properties. Then add incentives for developers when they provide additional open space over and above what is required. That's additional open space that is preserved tree canopy areas. And finally, zero in on provisions you can add to improve the health of the Indian River Lagoon. The Indian River Lagoon needs all the help Palm Bay can give it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Do we have a list of, did she submit those already?
Yes, sir, we have those.
Okay. Um, Regarding the Indian River Lagoon, ma'am, this council has increased our capacity with nutrient filtering baffle boxes. So we get the muck before it gets in. And not only that, we've also invested in trucks to clean out those baffle boxes. So thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you being here. Next speaker. Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
I've been watching it on TV, so I just got. Ruth Kofflow, 935 Douglas Street, Southeast. First of all, I'd like to compliment the staff on their professionalism and how they handled the workshops. They were very good. I didn't like the format so much as I would rather had a one-on-one conversation, but she did an awesome job and the whole place was really good. So my situation is with the cluster homes as well. I'm very concerned that if it's, I'm gonna make sure that I understand completely that it's single home, single story, and you can't take a 13-acre lot and cram many homes in that. I see that if we reduce the density just to give it more space for foliage and all that, when you reduce it, don't you increase the density? That's my concern. Same thing. I heard him say that it's not going to increase, but that doesn't make any sense. If you squeeze it, you're going to have the same amount of people crammed in one little space, and these houses that are so close together that we can have coffee out the window is ridiculous. Especially when people move to Florida, they want, the whole package. They don't want to come from where they were. They don't want to, be here. So, and then the second part of my concern is that the fact that there's concern about the infrastructure. I've heard all these things about 16% growth in Palm Bay. Well, where's that 16% increase in that revenue? So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Giancarlo Brown.
So on cluster subdivisions, again, it is a use and it is a conditional use, but it is a conditional use to the zoning district that it's permitted in. So for example, if we move forward with single family residential RS1, RS2, RS3, then you're talking about, 1 unit per acre. And when you're looking at smaller lot sizes, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're looking at smaller lot sizes, a 40-foot wide lot versus what you could get on a 1 acre lot, you then can fit more homes into an area, but you still must provide the open space. So you're not, it is just a trade-off. You're not allowing increased density. So the underlying density intensity of the zoning district still applies. But I defer to Lisa to correct me on any area where I'm wrong.
Well, I'm not going to correct you because you did a great job. But what I wanted to emphasize, and I know I had spoke with several people at the workshop about this, cluster subdivision, cluster developments is really known as an environmental tool. And what it does is that, again, if you have 10 acres and you have RS1 is 1 unit per acre, as Joan rightly stated. So you have 10 acres, you can put in 10 single family homes. This is all theoretical, of course. In a cluster subdivision, you're only going to put in 10 residential homes. You're not going to get more density. And it is used quite often for the parcels of land that may have extensive connected wetlands and
Wetlands.
or uplands that are protected. And so they set aside that and they put in the smaller lots, and people are, yes, clustered together, but we're doing that today. And they put them closer together in one area, and they can make very, very charming developments. I've viewed many of them. That's where even some of your, smaller homes could go, or even if it could be affordable, you could put it in there. But that's typically the tool. Again, there's no increase in density. You have to have the exact same density. It's just shoved off to one corner,
Thank
if
you.
you will. All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am. Come on.
Susan Connolly, 3901 Dixie Highway, Northeast Palm Bay. I don't know if I'm speaking at the right time or not, but one of my suggestions had to do with citizen participation plans. I didn't hear anything about that. Am I in phase 2 or no phase?
Yes, ma'am, you are in phase 2. No, we have captured we have captured all of the comments in
Okay.
this. Hold on, 30 sheets.
Good.
Here. And we have gone through every single one of them, and those that we felt may take a little time to digest or make even better, we decided that we would do after this critical point of getting our
Okay.
land development code in place. And then, as we all know, it's a living document. Changes will and edits occur all of the time. And so we can clean up some of those items at that time. But we have captured everyone's comments, and we have
Thank
those in
you.
there. I
Thank you very
promise.
much. And I'd like to just say to citizens, it's very important that the input at pbfl.org is still an open line. So even if other citizens have questions, there is still a continuation of the process.
And I would say, I think that's a great idea to keep that live even after adoption of this particular stage of the land development code, so that the citizens can provide us with continuous input instead of just sending emails off and hoping they get to the appropriate place.
Well, I actually had heard a comment to that effect, and I would like for council to solidify that. I think that is an excellent way to continue the discussion, continue the momentum, and these things take time to digest and learn, and the back and forth conversations is excellent. And I want to comment the staff and how they handled the citizen input. I know not every citizen could be there, but under the circumstances of 2 weeks or less, you all did a phenomenal job. And I want council to know how appreciative I am as a citizen and how we really got the word out in addition to what the staff did. And it was actually fun to go and to talk and to have such thorough, detailed people who understood. I mean, there was no, well, I'll get back to you, or let me check on that. I mean, the resources were there, they were prepared, and I would like to see that kind of citizen city collaboration in many things that involve citizen participation. I think it only makes us a greater city. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great idea to continue that dialogue and keeping that alive even long after, especially phase 2 and as a continual resource of our engagement. And I think that we owe the citizens that much. So as far as this council is concerned, I think we got thumbs up all around. So we're good to go to continue that dialogue. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, we're going to go item from item right now. Carry on, Ms. Joni.
Are there any items that you wish to go back to after hearing public comments?
Yes.
Okay. Let me go back to Juliet, if you wouldn't mind, the first council direction slide. Thank you.
Well, I think the biggest elephant in the room for Councilman Johnson and the mayor, I'm speaking in third party, but is the educational issues that he brought up, institutions, um, and their CU permit greater than 5,000 square feet. We want that to come back to council. At least this is from my perspective. So I'll let you take it, Councilman Johnson, since you first brought it up.
Yes, Mayor. Are we seeing a request from builders or from employers or from business owners?
So I can answer that. The where this concept came in is the concerns that have come up over schools that have expanded in the recent past and have not necessarily taken into account the traffic impacts due to increased capacity of students. So one area where this exists, and I want to say it was in neighborhood commercial, but only for a specific type of use. We had this limitation of 5,000 square feet. And the request for council's consideration to limit it to 5,000 square feet and neighborhood commercial only is in keeping with the intent of the neighborhood commercial district, which is stated in the zoning code, and I can pull it up if you'd like me to read it. It doesn't prohibit schools or educational institutions that are larger than 5,000 square feet. It just requires that they come back for a conditional use permit, which allows city council and staff to review and ensure that they're meeting all of the requirements for parking, for traffic circulation, you know, some things that we have faced in the recent past. So it's just staff wanting to be a little bit more diligent in considering those past concerns.
Okay. If I can get the city attorney's way in as well, it's hard for us to deny conditional uses. I think council would agree, because usually when they dot all the I's, cross all the T's, you have to. So I want to make sure we move carefully, Mayor, just like you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, because what I want is I want that access to say, okay, I looked at this traffic study with the school, right? And I think we could move forward in this. Now, my concern is like dojos or dance studios where we're harming those small businessmen, right? I don't ever want to harm the small businessman, right? So there's dojos that you have to consider. There's childcare facilities also that you have to consider. I think the sweet spot here is 5,000 square feet. And then if, you can't limit like the number of students, right? Because that's where I was initially. But I think that might be a good spot where it comes to us. And then at that point, there's things that have to be checked off: traffic study, what capacity does the roadway have. So I think this may be the best way to having this come to us, because otherwise right now it wouldn't come to us the way it is.
Wait, so no, I
Well,
thought
one
it
of the
was
things,
opposite, yeah.
well, no, it wouldn't. But one of the things I think, getting to your point, Councilman Johnson, is we have like conditional uses where it's just the general conditional use criteria. And then we have certain uses that not only have the general, but they have specific uses tailored to them. So what you may need as far as when we are looking at these educational uses is to have some specific criteria that is tailored to these schools that is going to look at the traffic impacts, so that you're not just getting the typical ingress, egress, and that type of thing, but something specific to the harm that you're really wanting to be able to make your decision based upon. So to that, you may be correct that staff may need to, if you're going to have this as a conditional use, have conditions that are specific to this use, so that you're considering if it looks like, the traffic isn't going to be something this neighborhood could accommodate, you have a basis to deny rather than have a conditional use and everybody comes here and then you're like, well, I know you guys are really mad and I know this may not work for your neighborhood necessarily, but these are the standards I have and we can't consider that. And I know that sometimes gets frustrating for the public because they like, if your standards don't accommodate the things that we think are important, you should change your standards. So I think it is worthwhile to make sure that our standards incorporate the things that you want to consider and that really make this compatible with the neighborhood.
Okay.
So how do we do that on top of the 5,000 square feet? How do we add more of that contingency to give us that authority?
Well, having it
sorry,
as a
did I
conditional
just-
use, but
No, you're good. I'll wait.
asking staff to look at as far as because you're going to have it as conditional use, but you're going to have separately what conditional use standards to making sure that there are standards in the conditional use where you're considering this that are applicable to the schools that really focus in on the traffic and how it affects the neighborhood. So that, because that is probably going to be one of the biggest things that you consider, as opposed to if you don't really have it as a standard, what you end up with is, well, traffic isn't considered at this point in time. You approve it, and then we'll consider the traffic later on, which doesn't usually leave most people satisfied.
Okay, so I didn't mean to cut you off, Councilman Johnson, but I think this is something right now. I think that's good. I'd like to have staff work on that. Now carry on.
Last question. How would these, if educational institution were to be approved in a neighborhood commercial, how would it be taxed? Would it be taxed like a IU? Would it be taxed like, because we just approved, removing the educational establishments and using the language for educational institutions, which includes public, charter, elementary, middle, high, college. Do you get what I'm asking? No?
If you're asking if you're allowing items that are not going to be taxed into your commercial area, that's probably correct. If that's what you're asking. Yes.
So it wouldn't be taxed as commercial, correct? Okay.
Not a school, but a dance studio. Would a dance studio be taxed? A karate studio be taxed, or jujitsu?
Yeah.
Or
You get what I mean, though. It's a
think
wide
what
definition.
you- I
It's a
think
wide
what you're saying-
definition. But if we open it up, then you can open it up where it could be one that can be, or it could be one that's not.
So I think, Councilman Johnson, you could correct me if I'm wrong. But I think what Councilman Johnson is getting to is if we're using this educational institution terminology, are the karate schools going to be taxed? Are the dance studios going to be taxed? Or is it because it's considered educational institution, there's no tax?
Well, karate and dance schools, I mean, certainly we don't say that wouldn't change, but your elementary schools, your charter schools aren't going to be taxed, and it doesn't matter where you put those at.
Copy that. Yeah. Did I explain it correctly? Okay. All right. So if we could, get into what Madam Attorney said, get into those specific details of giving council the opportunity to say, based on our ordinance or based on our land code, we have the authority to deny this conditional use. I think the staff understand that direction. Madam Attorney, is that how you articulate it? Did I convey that correctly?
Yes, we'll create some conditions. Certainly, my staff and growth will work together to create some conditions so that you are considering the traffic impacts when you're actually approving the conditional use.
Okay. Councilman Weinberg, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here's my thinking on this. Allowing educational institutions such as karate studios, dance studios, childcare facilities, those are commercial enterprises and they'll be taxed as such.
Yeah.
But to allow, and then it goes on to say, allow medium intense uses like a public or charter school. Well, in my mind, a public or a charter school is not a medium use, and that will minimize the interruption of traffic. We've all heard numerous horror stories about traffic by charter schools and public schools. So frankly, I'd like to see that absolutely just the public or charter schools, absolutely, even though it can be approved by conditional use, I'd like to see that eliminated from NC commercial zoning.
So that's an excellent point. Are we able to strike it?
Certainly, if that is council's prerogative, absolutely. You all
So-
have to figure out, because you're implementing the comprehensive plan. As far as this area, is this, how you feel it best implements the comprehensive plan to have it in this particular zone?
So there may be unintended consequences with a nursing school by definition. Would that be considered a charter school or a public school? But a nursing school, or I'm just concerned of
that would
any
be one of the
unintended
higher education.
consequences.
If I may, just to back up,
And if you didn't have that, it wouldn't be that the place couldn't be there. Instead of having a conditional use, you more likely, if it wasn't allowed in that, if they were neighborhood commercial and they wanted it, instead of getting a conditional use now, you'd have them essentially go into something like an institutional use, where they're they're going to a new land use because their land use would no longer be compatible. But it doesn't mean that they can't. It's just that their current use, that instead of going through a conditional use, they'd have a couple more steps.
Okay. Madam Brown?
so first I want to state schools are currently permitted by right with no limitation on square footage in neighborhood commercial. The second thing I wanted to point out is educational service establishments is now encompassed or will be encompassed in educational institution. It just creates one broad use category, if you will, where the 5,000 square foot limitation comes in is it allows the karate studios, the dance studios, the smaller nursing schools to come in permitted by right without a conditional use, so long as they're within that 5,000 square foot threshold. Anything beyond that, like charter schools and public schools, which are complementary to a neighborhood commercial district, serving the students of that residential neighborhood, anything beyond 5,000 square feet has to come to council. And of course, conditional use standards we'll look at are things like, traffic, that require a traffic study, look at the traffic circulation, look at the parking requirements, look at the pedestrian connections to get students safely to the school, requirements for sidewalks and things like that that make sense for that particular conditional use. So I just wanted to state some of that to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about when we say educational institutions in neighborhood commercial zoning district.
Councilman Johnson?
So technically, they can go into a neighborhood commercial right now without right with it. Well, okay, all right.
We have experiencing one. Yeah, I mean.
So I'm good with gentlemen getting back on track. I'm good with what our city attorney has said to work with growth management and hone in on this, because there is an existing, and all we're doing is creating an opportunity for us to come back and look at it and have enough ammunition to say we don't agree. All right, so I'm good there.
I'm good with.
Yeah.
Can we move forward on that?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, if I make one comment here, the last sentence of this is the intent remains minimizing the interruption of traffic along adjacent thoroughfares. Boy, that's a point of contention as far as I'm concerned, because I don't know about you, but I don't ever remember seeing a traffic study done on any proposed development that says, nope, this is going to cause excessive traffic and it's just going to be a problem. Which is that's a concern of mine. Then if it comes to they have a traffic study, it says yeah, no problem, and it comes before city council for conditional use approval. How can we deny that because we feel that it will create a traffic problem.
I'll let the city attorney just
I
answer that
understand
again.
that.
Well, it's not, it doesn't say that it causes a problem. The traffic study usually will identify what needs to be done to alleviate that problem. So maybe that this comes in and it's going to create these issues, but that's why we're saying that it needs additional turn lanes or it needs some type of traffic signal. And so essentially how you negate that or you discuss that is you have the experts. Certainly the developer have their expert that did the traffic study. The city will have its own in-staff experts that will review the traffic study. If there's something wrong with the methodology or there's something issue, usually our consultant or our staff will have already addressed that with the engineer before it comes forth. But usually you don't see that it doesn't cause a problem because they tell you how to mitigate the problems in the study itself.
Yeah, thank you. I was aware of that, but you know, I was just maybe a little exaggeration there. But again, I've seen where they have proposed mitigation, where you know, extended turn lanes and this type of stuff, and it really didn't solve the problem. So that's my concern with allowing charter schools and you know and public schools in NC development. But that's okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I'll rather spend another 30 minutes here now to handle this than
Go ahead.
you understand. So if we were to remove charter and public schools from this language, what would be the outcome? Would say they wanted to come forward, they would have to go for a rezoning, or would they have to?
If they had a site that was currently NC and we didn't have it permitted as a use or a conditional use, they would then have to seek a land use change to a use that would allow them to be a school.
And in that land use change, will we have more flexibility?
Well, land use change, you have the most flexibility.
Then that's where I would like to go. So
I'll second that.
So what we're talking about is striking public or charter school by conditional use. By conditional use, remove that language. Am I clear? Is that understood?
So you don't want it as a permitted or a conditional use in neighborhood commercial.
Correct. That's what I'm hearing.
Right.
Madam Brown.
I hear two. Are you the third?
Oh yeah, I'll jump in on that one.
So what we would need to do, we would have to bring back a change in the schedule of uses to ensure that we're allowing public schools and charter schools in other zoning districts. And yeah, I was just about to bring that up. Schedule of uses. It's allowed in RC, so a lot of those commercial properties along Malabar Road, for example. Institutional, it's allowed in institutional. Sorry, currently we have it defined in a variety of different ways, so let me see.
Madam Attorney, we can go down this path by striking that out.
Yes, it does appear that this is not our NC is not the only area that schools can go through as far as zoning. So if that was council's prerogative, yes.
Okay, so I've got 3 members on the dais that say strike that. If the city attorney is good with that, then I'm good. Deputy Mayor.
Mayor, I'm fine. That's what the majority wants. I mean, I was okay with the language.
The language. So now moving on to the next item, I want to talk about Ms. Saunders and how we could minimize her suggestion, right? How do we work on that item, the 10%? You guys are going to come back with certain criteria?
I'm sorry, I just one more minute so I can take
okay.
a note on what we
Okay,
just
carry
talked
on.
about, because there are other things this will impact. Okay. On the 10% for open space requirement under for commercial uses?
Yes.
May I suggest that we delineated more clear. I believe that's what the council was even stating, because the
Yes.
verbiage is in there. That really.
Ma'am, on the mic, Miss.
Sorry,
Simpson.
I don't know why this mic isn't loud enough for me. What I wanted to state is that the verbiage is in there, but I believe that, as you stated succinctly before, that perhaps we need to pull it out into a table or a list to make it much more clear as to what is allowable or similar, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
And I think that might address some of our outstanding issues with that.
Okay. All right. I just would like for Ms. Saunders to take a look and Bruce to look at that. Well, we're talking about the 20.
Yeah. Bruce
talk-
Bruce was
Yeah.
Bruce was the
I
10%. She was the
Bruce
20.
is 10. She's 20. Yeah. As you were. Did you hear what she said? She said, I'm always extra. No, you're not. So, all right, let's talk about Bruce's 10% and then we'll talk about Ms. Saunders' 20. So there's a criteria already completed that you said. All right, and we'll share that with Bruce. All right. So let's talk about how we deal with Ms. Saunders' 20% and make that a little more descriptive and stringent, or how we're going to work this out.
'That's what we're on right now.
20, Ms. Saunders, 20% of the commercial.
Are you asking staff to consider something specific?
Yeah,
or-
exactly. Yeah, different criteria, hone it in on.
So increasing so let me go back to, because Anna and I did talk about this yesterday evening as well. And so a lot of what is in this recommendation did come from her as a suggestion. So I just want to clarify. We are currently proposing to, well, first of all, I want to make sure everyone's aware of the definition of, or the requirement for common recreation and open spaces only applied to developable acreage. That's one. We are backing out the 100% of the wetlands or what is considered protected open space. We are backing out any required stormwater, any required easements, and any required rights of way for roads, for example. Was there something additional that I did not include?
Well, I think she was talking about the 20. Ma'am, would you want to come back up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess I would be more comfortable with a commercial requirement that's dictated or predicated upon a number of residential units that can support it, as opposed to a gross land area, regardless of what you less out. Again, the purpose of having the commercial is so it's viable, and we want it to, nobody wants a vacant strip mall. The residents don't want it. You guys don't want it. It doesn't look good. And so we want something there that's going to, make an impact, be useful, be part of that neighborhood commercial component or community commercial, whatever that zoning category is now. And the 40 square feet per unit had actually come, I think that originated actually with our office and helping the city generate that PMU code quite a few years ago. And I'm more than happy to share that information with you, but really where it comes from is just our decades of doing probably 20 or 30 DRIs, so developments of regional impact. We don't do those so much anymore, but in the 80s and 90s, those were very popular. I obviously did do that, but our office did. And so that's what that,
Yara did DRI.
yeah, so that's where that information came from. And again, I'm more than happy to facilitate that information and be.
All right.
very
Thank
well
you,
have a
ma'am. I
conversation.
appreciate you coming back
Yep.
up too. So, yes, ma'am.
So
Do you-
I just want to confirm, and Lisa, Pat, please correct me if I'm wrong. If we amend that, we must first amend our comprehensive plan because residential requires 20%, a minimum of 20% open space. And that can be activity-based or resource-based.
I think there are two items. One is open space, the other one is commercial.
Commercial.
Yeah, we're
So the
talking
issue with
commercial.
commercial.
We're doing commercial.
I
Yes.
apologize.
Yeah.
Yes, I
It's commercial,
understand
yeah.
that. We're talking commercial now.
Understand.
So,
I'm tracking now.
okay. Okay.
And I want to say that in my long career, that we have often struggled with what is the proper mix. And you ask an economist, you ask, real estate, you ask anyone in the field in these different, that wear different hats, and they'll say it depends. And it really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends on what the market is. It depends on where you are.
Well, I like that because you're right. You can't cookie cutter it, but I definitely want to get SCAR's input on this. I definitely want to get those details. Ms. Ondas talks about a DRI.
Yes.
Listen, this DRI that we call Viera today, it's huge. It's successful, that mix, right? So yeah, if we could get some of those details to be incorporated in this, then I think it's a win-win for us.
And that'll be phase 2, right?
I guess we're moving into phase 2 for that, or are we working on that for now?
We're trying to incorporate it before the second reading, which is September 19th. And we need to have our meetings with the engineers and SCAR. We will have to adjust the next couple of weeks schedule.
Oh, and I'm gonna take a pause. I'm gonna look at my council members, right? I think this is so important to me anyway, that we don't rush this through. If it's good for me for phase 2, then I would want a product that is successful. And so can we do this for a phase 2, or do we need to do it now? That's a question for staff.
I would prefer we don't rush it because I don't want us to be in a position like we have been in the
Correct,
last
okay.
few weeks, and staff has,
So this is something for phase 2 that I think
that's my
council,
preference, but I understand council's position.
Councilman Weinberg, Deputy Mayor, yeah, this is something for phase 2. We want to get this right, and we want to get the community's input on this. So definitely phase 2. Thank you for bringing up that DRI, because I love that DRI that was proposed so many years ago. I was on the board of county, not that I served as a staffer on the board of county commission during that time. Yes, ma'am. It was a great reference. Yeah, absolutely. So we're good on that. What's the next item, ma'am?
Let's see.
And this is
I
great
think the
dialogue.
only item that we haven't yet covered is just the broad conversation about the ensuring that we have a variety of uses allowed within the zoning districts. And Juliet, I know that we have the last presentation available. If we could bring that up, I believe we have the schedule of uses. If you just want to have a dialogue on uses you believe should be in districts that you don't think is covered, we'll note them down, and we'll take direction from there to see whether or not it's something that can be quickly accommodated before the second reading. But certainly in phase 2, we'd like to look at whether or not any of those uses really belong in that particular zoning district.
It's not in that PowerPoint, but if we have those boards that we created, we have them in one of those boards. I mean, the scale is pretty monumental, so.
Okay. I guess at this point, then, if there's anything that, any uses you haven't seen or didn't jump out at you in those zoning districts.
So one that was brought up, and I think you guys covered it, was the churches being in 2 different locations. And I think you guys addressed that. You addressed the convention center aspect to it. So council, anything else? Councilman Weinberg, Deputy Mayor, anything pops out? Okay, so I think we're good right now. So do you need a motion?
Yes,
Madam,
Yes, we need a
Madam
motion.
Clerk, okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve this item with all of council's directions and recommendations.
I got a motion by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Felix. Any additional discussion, Councilman Johnson?
I
Any-
appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the dialogue with staff, with the residents, because we want to take our time to get it done right. So that's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Mayor, I think, again, as it's been said, I think it's important that we do get it right. We put a lot of time. We asked the community to get involved, and we want to make sure we get it right. So.
Yeah. So first, I want to thank staff because I know the whole team was out this for months, and over the last few weeks, we've gotten rave reports from our citizens on your professionalism and the time that you took to put this all together in such a short period of time. We really appreciate your hard work, Madam Sherman. I commend the entire staff. So thank you for that. Then I want to commend our citizenry. For being engaged, and we're going to continue to keep that open. Yeah, come on. Then I want to commend our citizenry, but I also want to encourage what Ms. Frazier said, stay engaged. We're going to keep that line of communication open on a continual basis. And then thirdly, I want to commend Ms. Saunders for bringing up the DRI that just light bulbs went off in my head. And Mr. Moyer, for everything that you've done, really, really appreciate your engagement. So thank you for being here this late hour. With that being said, I got a motion by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Felix. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0. And that concludes this meeting. This meeting's adjourned.